What if a teenage girl returned from the edge of death with a message so terrifying, so urgent, that it could shake the very soul of America? Emily Carter was only 15 years old when her heart stopped beating. In that moment, when life should have slipped away forever, she says something extraordinary happened. Instead of darkness, she found herself standing face to face with Jesus Christ. And what he revealed to her was unlike anything she, or any of us, could have ever imagined. Emily claims she was shown the future of America. Not just one tragedy, but 4 cataclysmic disasters, each one more devastating than the last. These weren't vague images or dreamlike visions. They were vivid, real, and terrifyingly detailed. Earthquakes tearing cities apart, technology collapsing in an instant, famine spreading like wildfire, and finally, a nation ripping itself apart from within. But here's the most chilling part. According to Emily, these weren't random accidents of nature or history. They were warnings, spiritual wake-up calls, meant to test faith, expose fear, and force people to choose which side they would stand on when everything else was stripped away. And she insists this isn't just a story for the future. The signs, she says, are already here. The ground beneath our feet is shifting. The systems we trust most, our power, our money, our security, are far more fragile than we realize. And when they crumble, the line between despair and survival will come down to one thing: faith. This is not just Emily's testimony. It's a vision meant for an entire nation. Some will dismiss it. Others will feel a chill in their spine. But once you hear what Emily saw, once you step into her world beyond death, you may never look at America the same way again. Because if her vision is true, then the clock is already ticking. Imagine standing on a quiet street in Los Angeles. The sun is shining, traffic hums in the distance, and life feels perfectly normal. Then, without warning, the world beneath your feet begins to tear itself apart. Emily Carter says this is the first disaster she was shown, a nightmare that begins in California. In her vision, the mighty San Andreas Fault doesn't just tremble, it explodes. The ground rips open like a jagged wound stretching for miles. Highways buckle and twist like ribbons. Skyscrapers sway for a heartbeat before collapsing into clouds of fire and dust. Emily describes entire neighborhoods swallowed whole. Waves of water rush inland, devouring homes, cars, and lives within seconds. Sirens wail in every direction, but no one can escape the chaos. Streets once filled with laughter and music echo with screams of terror. Families are torn apart in the blink of an eye, and yet, in the middle of this devastation, Emily sees something strange, something she couldn't explain at first. While millions panic, a small group of people stands calm and unshaken. Buildings crumble around them. The earth splits beneath their feet, but they do not falter. Why? Emily insists it's because of their faith. They are not clinging to the ground beneath them, but to something higher, something unshakable. The vision grows darker. She sees California's economy vanish overnight, its once bustling cities reduced to rubble. The quake's destruction spreads like a chain reaction, shaking the entire nation. Panic ripples across the country as news broadcasts fail, power lines fall, and millions are left in the dark. But Emily's message is clear. This isn't just a warning about earthquakes. It's about foundations. California may crumble, but what about the rest of us? What are we really standing on? When the ground beneath us collapses, will we fall with it? Or will we still be standing? Emily says Jesus showed her this disaster not to terrify, but to prepare. The shaking is coming, and only those with unshakable faith will endure it. Picture this. You're sitting at home one evening. The TV is on. Your phone is buzzing with notifications. The hum of the refrigerator is in the background. Life feels perfectly ordinary. And then, in a single heartbeat, everything. The screen goes black. The phone in your hand freezes. The hum of machines vanishes into silence. Not just in your house, not just in your neighborhood, everywhere. This is the second disaster Emily Carter claims she was shown, a total collapse of technology. She describes it not as a rolling blackout or temporary outage, but as an event that paralyzes the entire nation in an instant. Planes fall from the sky. Cars stall on highways. Hospitals lose power. Banks, satellites, even military defenses, everything stops. Emily insists this isn't science fiction. In her vision, Jesus told her America's dependence on technology would be its downfall. We've built our lives on invisible systems, electricity, digital networks, global communications, so much so that we no longer know how to live without them. And when those systems vanish, panic sets in like wildfire. She describes scenes of chaos. Grocery store shelves stripped bare in hours, people fighting in the streets for food and water, families huddled in darkness, unsure if help will ever come. The silence of the modern world becomes deafening. But once again, Emily notices something different. While millions spiral into fear and violence, a small group of people remains steady. They light candles instead of cursing the darkness. They pray instead of panicking. Their hope doesn't come from technology. It comes from faith. The message Emily claims she received is chillingly clear. This collapse will test the heart of every American. Stripped of comfort and control, we'll face a question no device can answer. What do you really rely on when the lights go out? For Emily, the vision was unmistakable. The darkness is coming. And for many, it won't just be the loss of power, it will be the loss of hope. But for those who cling to something greater than electricity, something unbreakable, the night will not overcome them. Imagine walking into your local grocery store. Aisles that once overflowed with food now sit eerily empty. No bread, no milk, no canned goods, not even the basics. The shelves that once promised abundance now whisper only of desperation. This is the third vision Emily Carter says she received. Famine sweeping across America. Not in some distant land, but right here, in neighborhoods we know, in cities we trust to always provide. In her near-death experience, Emily describes seeing lines of hungry families stretching for blocks, waiting for food that never arrives. She saw parents rationing scraps, children crying out for meals that no longer exist, and communities descending into chaos as the supply chain collapsed. The hunger wasn't just physical, it gnawed at the spirit, turning neighbors into enemies and stripping away compassion piece by piece. According to Emily, Jesus revealed that America has taken its abundance for granted. We've grown accustomed to supermarkets brimming with choices, restaurants on every corner, and a culture that wastes more than some countries ever see. But in her vision, that abundance vanishes overnight. Fields wither, trucks stop moving, warehouses run dry. The famine was more than a shortage of food. It was a mirror held up to the nation's soul. Some turned to violence, stealing and hoarding to survive. Others collapsed into despair, unable to face the relentless hunger. And yet, Emily also saw a remnant who endured. These were people who turned back to faith, sharing what little they had, discovering strength not in full stomachs, but in unshakable trust. The image she paints is haunting. Imagine your child asking for dinner and having nothing to give. Imagine entire towns relying on prayer because no government, no system, no supply chain can save them. Emily's testimony leaves us with a sobering warning. America's famine will not just starve bodies, it will test hearts. And in that test, the difference between despair and survival will not be what you eat, but what you believe. Because when the cupboards are bare and hope itself seems rationed, faith may be the only nourishment left. What happens to a nation when fear and hunger collide? When lights go out? When food disappears? When survival hangs by a thread? Does unity hold, or does it shatter? Emily Carter's fourth vision answers that question with chilling clarity. America, once a land of one nation under God, breaks apart. Not by foreign armies, but by its own people. She describes seeing cities split down invisible fault lines, neighbors turning against neighbors, communities fracturing, states clashing with states. The crisis wasn't just about power outages or famine anymore. It was about identity, about loyalty, about who we really are when the pressure is on. In her vision, Emily saw political divides widen into unbridgeable canyons. Arguments that once played out on TV or online erupted into violence in the streets. Groups that once waved opposing banners now carried weapons. She saw protests morph into riots, law and order crumble, and families torn apart not just by hunger, but by hatred. But what struck her most wasn't the noise of conflict. It was the silence of unity gone. The very fabric that stitched America together, trust, shared values, belief in something greater, had unraveled. In its place, suspicion, betrayal, and bloodshed. According to Emily, Jesus revealed that division would be America's deepest wound. Not missiles, not famine, not even darkness itself, but the way Americans turn on each other. A house divided cannot stand, and in her vision, America became that house. Yet even in this bleak picture, she noticed a remnant who refused to join the chaos. They weren't defined by political allegiance or regional identity. They weren't shouting for one side or another. Instead, they clung to faith as their true anchor. While the nation split apart, they stood firm, not in violence, but in conviction. Emily's warning is razor sharp. Our greatest threat may not come from enemies overseas, but from the fracture within. The battle for America's soul will not be fought only with weapons, but with choices, whether to tear each other down or to hold on to something stronger than division. Because when a nation turns against itself, survival isn't just about borders or laws. It's about the spirit that binds its people together. And if that spirit dies, no army needs to march in. Freedom. It's the heartbeat of America, the promise carved into our founding documents, the anthem sung at every ballgame, the flag waving in every small town. But what if one day that heartbeat stopped? Emily Carter's fifth vision was perhaps the most terrifying of all, the collapse of American freedom itself. Not through invasion, but through control. She describes seeing a government, or something even larger, rising from the ashes of chaos, promising safety, order, and stability. But that promise came at a price: liberty. In her vision, Emily saw soldiers patrolling streets, checkpoints at every corner, identification demanded at every turn. Privacy was gone. Choice was gone. The freedoms Americans take for granted, speech, worship, movement, were stripped away under the banner of protection. What horrified her most was how quickly people accepted it. Exhausted from famine, blackouts, and division, many welcomed the new rules. They traded freedom for food, liberty for security, independence for survival. And in doing so, they lost the very thing that once defined America. Emily describes this new order as cold, mechanical, merciless. Families were watched, dissenters silenced, churches shuttered. Those who resisted were cast out, branded as enemies of peace. The land of the free had become a cage. But again, she saw a remnant, small, scattered, but unbroken. Men and women who refused to bow to fear. They didn't riot or lash out. Instead, they clung fiercely to faith, finding freedom not in governments or guarantees, but in something eternal. According to Emily, Jesus told her that America's true downfall would not be the loss of wealth, power, or even lives. It would be the loss of freedom. Because once a nation forgets that freedom is a gift, not a guarantee, it is willing to surrender it without even realizing what's been lost. The vision leaves us with a haunting question. What would you choose? Safety with chains or freedom with risk? For Emily, the answer was clear. True freedom is not granted by governments or secured by armies. It cannot be legislated or taken away. True freedom is found only in faith, and without it, America's fall is inevitable. What if the skies themselves turned against us? What if fire rained from above, swallowing cities whole, leaving nothing but ash and silence behind? Emily Carter's sixth vision was unlike anything she had seen before. If famine, darkness, division, and control shook America to its core, this was the vision that burned it to the ground. She saw flames consuming the horizon, firestorms sweeping through neighborhoods, skyscrapers collapsing under searing heat. The land itself seemed to convulse, as if judgment had been set loose. Emily describes entire cities vanishing in seconds, swallowed by explosions that lit the night brighter than the sun. She heard the screams of thousands fading into silence, the crackle of fire devouring everything once familiar. What struck her most wasn't just the destruction, it was the sense of finality. There was no rebuilding, no return, no going back. She recounts seeing people run, searching for shelter that didn't exist. Fire was everywhere, on the ground, in the skies, even the oceans seemed to boil. In her vision, America became a nation in flames, its proud monuments and bustling streets reduced to rubble. But amidst the fire, Emily saw something even more terrifying. Faces filled not only with fear, but with regret. Regret for ignoring the warnings, regret for chasing after comfort instead of truth, regret for waiting until it was too late. And yet, once again, there was a remnant. Scattered, hidden, almost invisible, but they endured. They were not spared from pain or loss, but they carried a light within them that fire could not consume. For Emily, this remnant symbolized hope, not in America's survival, but in something greater than the nation itself. According to what Emily heard from Jesus, the fire was not random. It was a purging, a judgment allowed to strip away everything false and fragile, leaving only what was eternal. The day of fire was not about fear, but about truth. When the world burns, only faith remains. So Emily's question echoes across time. If fire fell tomorrow, what would remain in you? Out of ashes, a flicker of light. Out of chaos, a whisper of hope. Emily Carter's seventh vision was not about destruction, but about survival, about a people who refused to disappear. She calls them the remnant, and in a world torn apart by famine, darkness, division, and fire, they rose not with weapons or armies, but with faith. Emily describes seeing small groups scattered across the nation, hidden in homes, gathered in barns, even worshiping in forests by candlelight. They were not the rich or the powerful. They were ordinary men and women who refused to let fear write their future. Parents teaching their children to pray when food was scarce. Neighbors sharing scraps instead of hoarding. Communities finding strength not in governments or leaders, but in God. What struck Emily most was their resilience. They had nothing by the world's standards. No wealth, no freedom, no guarantees of safety. Yet they carried something unshakable. Faith that burned brighter than the fires around them. She saw the remnant singing when others wept, sharing when others stole, standing firm when others bowed. They weren't untouched by suffering. They felt hunger, loss, and grief, but suffering did not define them. Faith did. According to Emily, Jesus told her this remnant would be America's true legacy, not its monuments or armies, not its wealth or power, but a scattered, faithful people who would endure and carry hope into the future. The vision was clear. While the nation crumbled, the remnant stood. Not because of their strength, but because they trusted in a strength beyond themselves. Emily's message is haunting, but also deeply inspiring. Even when everything collapses, when freedom falls, when fire consumes, when hope seems lost, there will always be a remnant. A light in the darkness, a voice in the silence, a spark of faith that cannot be extinguished. So the question remains, when the world falls apart, will you be among the remnant? Every story has a climax. Every storm reaches its peak. And in Emily Carter's visions, the final message was not comfort. It was a warning. She recalls hearing Jesus speak with a voice that carried both sorrow and urgency. This was not a gentle whisper of hope, but a thunderclap demanding attention. America, your time is short. Emily describes a sense of overwhelming stillness before the end, like the moment before a tornado strikes. She saw people going about their lives, shopping, working, laughing, as if nothing was wrong. But in the heavens, judgment was already set in motion. The warning was clear. Repent now, or face what comes next. It wasn't about politics, wealth, or power. It was about the heart of the nation. A nation that once declared, "In God we trust," but had turned that trust into empty words. Jesus showed Emily that the disasters, the famine, the blackouts, the fire, were not random tragedies. They were wake-up calls, alarms ringing in the night. Yet so many ignored them, clinging to comfort, chasing after distraction, refusing to see what was coming. Emily wept as she recounted his words. "I have warned you again and again. But if you will not listen, the day will come when my voice will fall silent." The final warning was not simply about America's future. It was about every individual's choice. Because no government, no army, no wealth can shield against the hand of judgment. Only repentance, only faith, only turning back can alter what is written. Emily's vision leaves us with a terrifying question. What if the final warning has already been spoken? For her, the answer was clear. Time is not endless. Choices cannot be delayed. And when the last warning sounds, there will be no second chances. So the challenge is personal. Will you hear the warning, or will you be caught in the silence that follows? Every vision Emily Carter received pointed to this moment, the message she was meant to deliver. Not just for her hometown, not just for her generation, but for an entire nation standing at the edge of destiny. Her final words were not filled with fear, but with urgency. She spoke of a crossroads, a final choice placed before America. Two paths stretched into the future, one of repentance, faith, and renewal, and one of pride, rebellion, and ruin. Emily reminded us that America's greatness was never built on power alone. It was built on trust in God, on families that prayed together, on communities that cared for one another, on a moral foundation that gave strength to its people. But she also warned that a nation cannot survive if it forgets the one who gave it life. Her message was not political, it was personal. She asked every listener to search their own heart, to ask the question no one can escape. Where do I stand when the storms come? Emily said the visions were not meant to terrify, but to awaken. They were not the end of hope, but a call to return before hope runs out. She pleaded for people to stop waiting for tomorrow, because tomorrow may never come. Her last words echo like a bell tolling across the night. America, turn back while there is still time. The darkness will come, but light can still be found for those who choose it. And that is where her story ends, but where ours begins. The question she leaves behind is not about her, not about visions, not about prophecy. It is about us, about you, about the choices we make now before the final chapter is written. So here we stand, with America's future hanging in the balance. The warnings have been spoken, the visions revealed, the fire shown. The only question left is the one that will shape eternity. When the hour comes, where will you stand?